Why most men don't want friends, social clairs, or relationships anymore. And I know exactly why here's something nobody wants to say out loud. There is a growing number of men, smart men, capable men, men with something to offer, who have quietly, deliberately, and without bitterness opted out. Not out of desperation, not out of failure, not because they couldn't get friends or find a relationship or build a social circle, but because at some point they did the math, and the math didn't work. They looked at what friendship was costing them, the emotional energy, the time, the loyalty that was never returned at the same frequency, and they thought, is this actually worth it? They looked at the dating landscape and saw a game so rigged, so exhausting, so psychologically corrosive, that opting out felt less like giving up and more like self-preservation. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. They're not wrong. That's the part that nobody in mainstream culture wants to touch. Because if we admit they're not wrong, we have to ask a much harder question. Not about these men, but about the world those men are responding to. Today, we're going to ask that question. And I promise you, by the end of this, whether you agree or violently disagree, you will not be able to say you didn't see this coming. Picture this. Marcus is 31. He has a decent job, his own apartment, a gym routine he actually sticks to. By every external measurement, he's a functioning, stable adult. 2 years ago, Marcus had a friend group. 6 guys. They had a group chat. They talked almost every day. They had a standing Saturday thing. Football games, barbecues, the occasional bar night. Then Marcus went through something hard. Lost his job. For 3 months. Real financial pressure. Real anxiety. The kind of thing that strips the performance away and leaves just the person. He reached out, not dramatically. Not with a crisis text at 2 a.m. He just said, "Hey, I'm going through it right now. Could use some company." 2 people responded. One of those 2 actually showed up. The other 4? Silence. Not cruelty, just absence. The kind of absence that teaches you something about the nature of the connection you thought you had. Marcus didn't explode. He didn't send an angry message. He didn't call anyone out. He just quietly updated his understanding of what those relationships actually were. And after that, he stopped investing at the same level. He stopped organizing the hangouts. He stopped being the one who remembered birthdays and checked in after hard weeks. He stopped being the social glue. And you know what happened? The group fell apart in 4 months, which told Marcus everything he needed to know. He wasn't part of a friendship. He was part of a service he'd been providing. And when he stopped providing it, the friendship had nothing left to stand on. That moment, that quiet, undramatic realization, is happening to millions of men right now. And it is reshaping the social landscape in ways we are only beginning to understand. Here's what Marcus's story reveals that most people miss. His withdrawal wasn't depression. It wasn't antisocial personality disorder. It wasn't toxic masculinity or fragile ego or any of the easy diagnoses our culture loves to apply to men who disengage. It was rational response to accurate information. Marcus ran an experiment, not intentionally, but experientially. He reduced his output and observed what remained. What remained was almost nothing. So he recalibrated accordingly. This is actually a sign of intelligence, not damage. But here's the deeper observation. And this is the part that stings. Most male friendships in modern Western culture are built on proximity and convenience, not genuine emotional investment. Think about it. How many male friendships survive a change of city, a change of job, a change of relationship status? How many of those brothers from college are still actually present in your life, not just in your phone contacts? The research here is brutal. Studies consistently show that men's social networks shrink dramatically after age 25, and the friendships that remain are often what sociologists call low-maintenance, low-depth connections. They feel warm when you're in the room together, but they don't travel, they don't survive difficulty, they don't hold weight, and somewhere, quietly, men have started to notice. Not all at once, not with a manifesto, just one Marcus at a time, one unanswered message at a time. One birthday nobody remembered, one hard week that revealed who actually cared. And slowly, the social contracts that men were told were solid turn out to be written in disappearing ink. Now let's talk about the system. Because Marcus didn't wake up in a vacuum. He woke up inside a culture that has been quietly, consistently, and sometimes deliberately making genuine human connection harder for men, especially in the context of relationships and dating. Let's start with dating apps. Dating apps were sold to us as efficiency, Why leave the house when love could be a swipe away? What they actually created was a gamified simulation of intimacy, one that runs on manufactured scarcity, intermittent reinforcement, and the constant psychological suggestion that something better might be one more swipe away. For women, this created a paradox of abundance, so many options that choosing feels impossible and commitment feels like loss. For men, and I want to be precise here because the data is clear, the experience was largely one of invisible rejection at industrial scale. Studies from dating apps themselves, and this is the part that got buried, showed that the bottom 78% of men on these platforms were competing for the bottom 22% of women, while the top 78% of women were competing for the top 22% of men. Read that again. The architecture of these platforms, designed to maximize engagement, not connection, created an environment where most men experienced what amounted to a daily rejection notification, where the message sent was consistently, "You are not enough." And after years of this, years of crafting messages that go unanswered, years of matches that never convert to conversations, years of conversations that go nowhere, something shifts, not into bitterness necessarily, into recalculation. Is this where I want to invest my energy? Is this return worth this cost? Is this experience making me more or less capable of genuine connection? For a growing number of men, the answer is landing on the same side. Then there's social media, the other great relationship disruptor. Social media didn't just change how we communicate. It changed what we think communication is for. It turned human connection into a performance metric. It made vulnerability a content strategy. It made authenticity a brand. And men, who were already operating in a culture that gave them minimal permission to be emotionally honest, found themselves navigating a social landscape where even emotional expression had been turned into competition for attention. You're not sad, you're posting about being sad. You're not achieving things, you're curating your achievement. You're not in a relationship, you're in a relationship that exists publicly enough to count. In this environment, what does genuine male friendship even look like? Where is the space for the unperformed, unfiltered, unoptimized connection that actually sustains a human being? For many men, that space has quietly closed, and they haven't replaced it with anything. They've just stopped needing the performance version of it. And here's the cultural critique that ties this together. We have built systems that commodify connection, monetize loneliness, and then express confusion when people stop showing up. Dating apps profit from you not finding a partner, because a partner means you delete the app. Social media profits from your longing, because satisfaction doesn't scroll. The attention economy is built on your emotional deficit, not your emotional fulfillment. Men opting out of this are not broken. They have simply identified the business model. Let me give you several realizations that most conversations about this topic never reach. The loneliness crisis in men is not a crisis of access. It's a crisis of reciprocity. Men are not lonely because they can't find people. Most men are surrounded by people. They work with people. They live near people. They are technically socially present every single day. But there is a difference between being around people and being seen by people. Most men have not been seen, genuinely, unconditionally seen by another person since childhood, maybe not even then. The modern male experience is profoundly one of performing strength for an audience that neither notices the performance nor rewards the exhaustion behind it. And when you've been performing for long enough without a single person in the audience saying, "Hey, I see you, you don't have to keep performing for me," eventually you stop going to the theater, not because you don't want connection, because you've stopped believing the theater is where connection lives. Men don't have fewer emotional needs than women. They have fewer socially sanctioned places to express them. This is the one that makes people uncomfortable, because it challenges a story we've been telling for decades. The narrative has been, men are emotionally closed off by nature. Men don't open up. Men don't ask for help. Men have fragile egos that prevent vulnerability. But consider an alternative explanation. What if men are not less emotional, but rather have learned, through years of social feedback, that their emotions are unwelcome? Think about what happens when a man cries in public. Think about what happens when a man admits fear to another man. Think about what happens when a man expresses that he's struggling not just with logistics, but with meaning, with loneliness, with uncertainty, with the terrifying openness of genuine vulnerability. More often than not, the social response, even from well-meaning people, is discomfort. Redirection. A quick pivot to solution mode. A subtle, unspoken message. Wrap this up. This is making everyone uncomfortable. You train a dog to stop barking by ignoring the bark. You train a human to stop emoting by making the emotion a social liability. Men have not failed to develop emotional depth. They have been systematically trained to keep it underground. And now, in a culture that simultaneously tells men to open up while still punishing them when they do, many men have arrived at a very reasonable conclusion. Why open up for an audience that isn't ready to receive what I actually have to say? Modern relationships have restructured the cost-benefit analysis in ways that disproportionately disadvantage men, and most men know it, even if they don't have the language for it. This is where I'll lose some people, and I want you to stay with me, because this is not a men versus women argument. It's a systems argument. The architecture of modern romantic relationships, culturally, legally, economically, has shifted significantly in the last 40 years. Women have gained more freedom, more options, more leverage. This is not bad. The expansion of women's autonomy is, on the whole, a good thing. But here's the honest part. Anytime the terms of a negotiation change significantly, both parties have to decide whether the new terms still work for them. For a growing number of men, the honest answer is, I'm not sure they do. Not because they hate women, not because they want the old terms back, but because when they look at what commitment cost them financially, emotionally, in terms of identity and freedom and risk, and they look at the cultural narrative that frames men as the problem in every failed relationship, as the obstacle to female happiness, as the thing to be fixed and managed and improved, they think, what exactly am I signing up for here? And if they can't answer that question satisfactorily, more and more of them are choosing not to sign. Solitude and loneliness are not the same thing, and modern men are increasingly choosing the former over the risk of the latter. This is perhaps the most important distinction in this entire conversation. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted isolation, the feeling that you want connection but cannot access it. Solitude is the peace of chosen aloneness, the feeling that you have decided, deliberately, that your own company is sufficient, at least for now. Many of the men who have opted out are not lonely. They are solitary. They have built lives that work on their own terms. They have hobbies that absorb them. They have purpose that doesn't require validation. They have arrived at a kind of self-sufficiency that the social world told them was impossible. You need people, you need community, you need a partner, and quietly proved it wrong. Is this ideal? Maybe not. Is it understandable? Absolutely. When the cost of reaching out has consistently been disappointment, the rational adaptation is to need less or to learn to give yourself what other people couldn't. Now here's where we go deeper. Because everything I've said so far is just the surface layer. The deeper truth is this: what we are witnessing is not a personal failure. It is a civilizational feedback loop. And let me paint you the full picture. For generations, men were given a very clear social contract. Work hard, provide, protect, show up. In return, you would receive belonging, a family, a community, a sense of purpose tied to something larger than yourself. That contract, whatever its flaws, gave men a legible role. A comprehensible answer to the question, why am I here? What am I for? That contract has been dismantled, and it needed to be dismantled. Many of its terms were unjust, particularly for women. The dismantling was necessary. But here's what nobody planned for. When you tear down an old structure, you have to build something new. And we never built a new structure. We told men, you don't have to be the stoic provider anymore. You can be vulnerable. You can be emotionally present. You can share the load. And then we built nothing to support that new identity. No cultural models for what emotionally healthy masculinity actually looks like in practice. No social infrastructure for male emotional expression. No new contract that gave men a legible role in a world that no longer needed them to perform the old one. We handed men a map to a territory that doesn't exist yet, and then we called them lost. Here's another layer. The men who have opted out are not the weakest men. They are often among the most self-aware. The man who stays in a social circle where he's not genuinely valued, who keeps swiping on apps that consistently degrade his self-image, who keeps performing strength for an audience that will never acknowledge the performance. That man is not strong. He's conditioned. The man who looks at the situation clearly, assesses the return on his emotional investment, and says, this isn't working, and I'm going to stop pretending it is. That man is operating with a level of honest self-assessment that our culture rarely teaches and almost never rewards. He's just doing it in isolation, which is where the tragedy lives. Let me give you one more scenario. Daniel is 28. He went on a date last month with a woman he genuinely liked. Good conversation, Real chemistry. He texted the next day honest, not game playing, said he had a good time and wanted to see her again. She left him on read for 4 days, then responded with, "Sorry, been busy, yeah, could be fun," the romantic equivalent of a corporate auto reply. Daniel is not devastated. He has been here before. What he feels is something quieter than hurt and more durable than disappointment. He feels confirmed, not in a cynical way, not in a finical way. In the way that a scientist feels when an experiment produces results consistent with the hypothesis. He has learned, through repetition, through pattern, that the emotional register he brings to early connection is not matched, not welcomed, not rewarded. And so, slowly, he stops bringing it, not because he doesn't have it, but because he has learned where it goes to die. And a man who has learned where his warmth goes to die will eventually stop being warm in public, not forever, but long enough for the warmth to calcify into armor. This is how you make a generation of men who seem cold, not by breaking them dramatically, but by disappointing them incrementally until the distance becomes a permanent feature of the architecture. Now let's talk about what this means for everyone, because here's the part that turns this from a men's issue into a civilization issue. Connection is not a luxury, it is a biological necessity. And a society full of disconnected men is not a healthy society. It is a pressurized one. Men who have no social bonds, no relational investment, no sense of belonging. Historically, sociologically, psychologically, are men with nothing to lose. And men with nothing to lose are not men who build things, they are men who drift or burn. This is not a moral judgment on those men. It is an observation about what happens to human beings when the fundamental need for belonging goes unmet long enough. The research on male loneliness and its downstream effects on health, on productivity, on social behavior, on political radicalization is not ambiguous. Disconnected men don't just suffer individually, the disconnection ripples. And yet the cultural response has been, largely, to continue diagnosing the men rather than the conditions that produce them. Why are men so angry? We ask, while building systems that consistently communicate to men that they are unwanted, unnecessary, and unreformable. Why are men withdrawing? We ask, while offering them social environments that punish authenticity and reward performance. Why don't men open up? We ask, while flinching every time they actually do. Here's the line that I want to leave you with. There's a concept in physics called signal-to-noise ratio. It describes the relationship between the information you actually want to receive and the interference that surrounds it. When the noise gets too loud, when there's too much static, too much distortion, too much competing interference, the receiver has two options. Amplify the signal, hoping it breaks through, or turn off the receiver. Most men have been amplifying for years. Louder gestures, more effort, more investment, more vulnerability risked in the hope that this time the signal would land. And somewhere, quietly, without announcement, they stopped amplifying. Not because the signal died, but because after enough years of transmitting into static, a man learned something painful and important. A signal that is never received is functionally the same as silence. So they chose silence. Their own silence on their own terms, rather than the silence of being perpetually ignored. And here's what I think. Genuinely, uncomfortably think, the solution to this is not to tell men they're wrong to protect themselves. The solution is to build a world where their signal is actually worth sending into, where vulnerability is met with care, not weaponized, where friendship means something when the going gets hard, where relationships are designed for both people to win, not just to survive. Because men are not opting out of connection, they are opting out of the counterfeit version of it. And honestly, that might be the most hopeful thing about this entire story, because it means the appetite is still there. Buried under the armor, quieted but not dead. The desire for genuine friendship, for real love, for belonging that doesn't require performance, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's just waiting. Waiting for conditions that are actually worth showing up for. The question is whether we, all of us, the whole culture, are willing to do the work of creating those conditions, or whether we'll keep staring at the men sitting alone at the coffee shop window and asking what's wrong with them, instead of asking what we built, and why it keeps failing so many people who just wanted something real. If this landed for you, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in this, because this conversation doesn't end here. It starts here.